You know, you might have gotten a little bit too close to the truth when you write a little op-ed piece, and then every single person that's been shilling for comic books has to come out there and kind of defame you and antagonize you and counterpoint everything that you said. Obviously, I'm talking about the Phil Boyle op-ed that was out in Bounding Into Comics, as well as ICV2.com and a few other places that got people talking about basically saying, if Marvel and DC don't make real changes within the next 2 years, there will be no direct market to save. There will be no local comic book shops left. There won't be a viability, a sustainability of what we have right now in comic books and comic book culture. And we had Heidi McDonald kind of going out there and defaming him and then kind of getting put in their place. We had Rich Johnson saying, oh, no, everything's fine, trying to hide his head under the sand. We had Brian Hibb saying, this man is exactly right. Except for the culture war stuff. Apparently, it's become taboo to point out the obvious nowadays. How have we gotten to this place in time where you can point out the exact obvious things that aren't working and be like, you can't say that? That wasn't nice. Yes, sometimes the truth does hurt. That a lot of people have got fed up. A lot of people have decided to walk away. A lot of Wednesday Warriors just aren't Wednesday Warriors anymore because Marvel and DC have driven a lot of the readers off. We still have some collectors. We certainly have a lot of speculators. And we do have people that are morons and just have hope for no reason, looking at yours truly here. And there have been a couple of other articles that came out this week that I thought were very interesting. One was from Tom Brevoort. Actually, not really an article. I guess it's a newsletter on his Substack. I did want to talk about some of the things that he said. Also, Milton Greep at ICV2.com also had a rebuttal to that with some suggestions for comic book retailers that I think kind of misses the point. So I am going to get to all that in Tom Brevoort's assertion that people are cheering on. We're just so happy that comic books are dying. We're so happy that there doesn't appear to be a long-term viable future for the traditional backbone of the American comic book market. First up, Brevoort said there's been a lot of chatter this past week concerning the state of the comic book marketplace following a column written by one prominent retailer. And let's face it, forget about comic books. Retailing of any sort is an extremely difficult vocation in 2023. I can recall similar conversations as this one taking place all the way back to my entry into the business in 1989. No doubt they were going on before that, particularly in the 1970s and the 1950s, and so on and so on. So I guess Tom Brevoort's excuse for actually driving people out of business is, well, it's been happening for so long. You don't need to pay attention when people are going out of business. We don't need to pay attention when people who don't normally complain are actually out there saying the comic book industry itself, as we know it, really only has 2 years left if Marvel and DC don't make changes. And obviously, Tom Brevoort is a big part of that. He's the longest tenured employee at Marvel Comics. He's an executive editor. He's basically right underneath C.B. Cebulski as far as power and influence at Marvel Comics when it comes to their publishing. I don't know that it was Tom Brevoort's idea specifically to replace Tony Stark with Riri Williams, or to replace Steve Rogers with Sam Wilson, or to replace Bruce Banner with Go-Gurt Hulk, or all these other stupid changes that they did when they had the hottest properties in the world, the hottest characters in the entire world, and they decided to switch them all out. Many of them right on the Avengers line that Tom Brevoort had been overseeing for decades at that point. I don't know that he made all of those decisions, but he certainly went along with them, and he has been a part of the problem. He then states, we somehow delight in predicting the demise of the very thing that we enjoy so much. Maybe that reveals a poor sense of self-worth or something, but also in any endeavor, if you bet in favor of failure, you're going to be right sooner or later. Nothing lasts forever. Entropy wins. Still, those folks who were predicting the demise of the field 10 or 20 or 30 years ago would no doubt be shocked to learn that it is still here. This is the thing that I really don't understand about what he's saying in the Substack. Who's taking delight in the demise of Marvel and DC? Who's taking delight in the demise of the direct market? Who's actually reveling in the fact that a traditional American art form is absolutely being dominated by Japan at this moment and is becoming irrelevant? I know I'm not reveling in it. I don't see a whole lot of reveling out there. I do see a whole lot of people pointing out the mistakes that Marvel and DC have been making for the past 6 or 7 years that Tom Brevoort has been a part of. But I don't see a whole lot of people that are just real gleeful, that are just so happy that all of a sudden their favorite heroes, the best universes, the best storytelling medium in the history of the world isn't being used effectively, for the traditional American superhero publishers. No one's happy about this. Everyone is fed up and they've had enough. And sometimes you do have to laugh at just how terrible things have gotten, just how many times Marvel and DC have made the exact same mistakes, expecting a different result, because sometimes it probably is better and healthier to laugh rather than cry about the entire situation. But these mistakes have been going on for like a decade now at Marvel Comics, and they've shown no actual want to or ability to change direction, to actually course correct and do something better. And I will freely admit that Tom Brevoort does have a bit of a point there. Nothing lasts forever. Nothing's ever going to last forever. There was a time in a not too distant past that TWA was the biggest airline in the entire world. There's an entire generation or two of Americans that probably don't even know what TWA is. There is a life cycle on brands and characters and all these things, but it doesn't actually have to be happening now. It actually doesn't need to be the moment that the direct market goes under. This doesn't have to be the moment that Marvel and DC make themselves irrelevant, because there is so much awareness of Marvel's characters, and there have been for the last decade, and there is a lot of awareness of DC's characters, especially Batman. And there are more comic book readers today than there have ever been. They're just not reading Marvel and DC. So what are Marvel and DC doing wrong? What is Tom Brevoort doing wrong that is actually alienating the readers themselves? Because we can see by the results, it's not the actual medium of comic books themselves that is turning people away. We can see when you do something exciting with some of these amazing characters like House of X, Powers of 10, or you do a Batman 3 Jokers, people that have walked away actually come back because they get excited because they want to be reading comic books now. Why aren't they coming back full time? Why have they been led on a path over to manga? It's because the quality is bad basically across the board. And that is absolutely a major failing on the part of Tom Brevoort. And no one's happy about that. Finally, he says, what is likely happening is that the market is changing, and change is almost always scary, but it doesn't have to be the end. It just means that some people are going to be different now, and it falls to us to adjust to those changes. People hoping that the comic book industry will somehow revert to being the way it was when they were kids are definitely in for disappointment, but I feel confident in saying that the medium will survive. There is no doubt that the medium of comic books will survive. It's more popular now than ever. The real question is, will Marvel and DC as comic book publishers survive? That's really what's on the table here. Will the direct market survive? That's what's on the table here. Will we have a vibrant American comic book industry? That's what's on the table here. Because yes, kids are reading comic books. They're reading Catman. They're reading Dogman. They're reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid. They're reading Smile and all that stuff. And then they're bypassing DC and Marvel, and they're going directly over to manga, and they're reading Japanese imports rather than the best heroes in the history of entertainment, in my opinion. The best heroes in all of comic books belong in the American comic book market, but they're not being used correctly. And no, Marvel and DC have not adjusted to the market correctly. I agree. It will never, ever be like when we were kids again. We will never get back to a moment where you go into a pharmacy or your grocery store and there's always a spinner rack with comic books. That is no longer going to be the case. I know people want to bring it back. It just ain't happening. It's not viable. But there is something out there that is basically the new spinner rack, and that is phones, tablets, mobile devices. That's what people are using to discover comic books right now. And Marvel and DC basically handed their digital strategy over to Comixology. Guess what? Comixology doesn't exist anymore. But are Marvel and DC going to survive? And I don't think they will if they don't make those immediate changes that Phil Boyle talked about. And that's the thing that he's really avoiding here. He's not really answering what Phil Boyle was talking about. He's just saying, we've seen this so many times. We've seen this over the decades. It's always happening. And earlier he says, would those people 30 years ago be surprised that we're still here? Are you still here? That's the real question. Are Marvel and DC still here? Because you are a pimple on the ass of the comic book market in North America these days. You have a fraction of the sales of imports from Japan. And guess what? The American market represents a fraction of those sales because they sell even more in the Asian market and European markets as well, because they are a worldwide phenomenon, because they actually had a real strategy. You know, I went back and I was looking at some of the old Comixology numbers. You know, 1996, Tom Brevoort would have been at Marvel 7 years at that point, and they had 22 comic books selling over 100,000 comics each every single month. If they sell one comic book over $100,000 in 2023, Tom Brevoort feels like he should get a bonus because he did a good job. There have been two constants at Marvel Comics over the last 30 years. Declines in sales, and Tom Brevoort still working there. Now, as I mentioned, Milton Great from ICV2.com also weighed in on this, and he was talking about the market changing and what he thinks the direct market needs to do to adapt to that. I am more optimistic about the future of comic stores than Phil Boyle, even if the big two don't get their act together anytime soon. I think direct market retailers can adapt to the market as it exists, retaining what's working for them in the periodical business while expanding their sales of manga, webtoon collections, kids graphic novels, and original graphic novels. They can continue to win customers based on the curation and on the authenticity that selling periodicals imparts to the store experience. They can build community around creators and shared taste and nurture a devoted customer base. That is absolutely true. There are two things that the direct market has working for it that the competition don't have, where we're talking about the major bookstores. You do have the personalized experience, and if you have a great comic book shop with a great owner and a great manager and really good employees that know what you like to read in comic books, that is an enormous bonus to go there every single week because they're going to know what you're actually going to look for. That is great in a personalized experience, and being the best in the community at being able to deliver great stories and knowing your customers is a real added bonus. But Milton Greep absolutely misses the enormous elephant in the room when it comes to local comic book shops. When it comes to the direct market, the real advantage they have over Amazon, the big advantage they have over Walmart, the big advantage they have over Target, all those places, online retail and all that kind of stuff, is periodicals itself. You don't really see them on Amazon, and if you do, it's very hard to get them. They do not show up in a timely fashion, and they're probably not going to show up intact. Amazon does not ship well when it comes to floppy comic books. You do not really see them at Target. You don't really see them at Walmart. They have a product that is distinct to their marketplace that gives them a fighting chance against the big box retailers out there. And Marvel and DC are not filling that product with good stories. Thus, there is no enthusiasm. Thus, people have walked away and stopped showing up every single Wednesday. Along with that product, not only do you get periodic ongoing storytelling, which is absolutely fantastic. In the case of Marvel and DC, you get shared connected universes with the chances for things to get even bigger and bigger as they do crossovers if they're done correctly. And those are huge factors for the appeal of periodic comic books and the reason that they have a fighting chance. But there also is a collector aspect to it. There is the potential when you spend $3.99 or $4.99 or $5.99 or whatever the price is for your one issue, that there's an appearance in there, or maybe there's an artist in there that you don't know yet that gets bigger later, that it could be worth a lot of money in the future. It might take 20 years, it might take 30 years, it might take 40 years, but there is the potential of the collector aspect that you might actually be able to flip that for a lot of money in the future. You don't get that with graphic novels. You don't get that with webtoon collections. You don't get that with Dogman or in Smile and any of that kind of stuff. There isn't that kind of interest and speculator interest in that product that there is in periodics. If DC and Marvel can't make the periodic experience actually stand out and give people a reason to come back to comic book shops, then they really don't have a fighting chance. And that's been the real problem all along. Yes, you can diversify your product line. You can start selling manga. You can start selling webtoon collections and OGNs and all that kind of stuff. Local comic book shops, the direct market, will never, ever, ever be able to compete with Amazon, Walmart, Target, or any of those companies. Barnes and Nobles will never be able to compete with them on a price basis. Amazon can offer collected editions at a discount on day one because they don't even need to make the profit to make sure that Amazon is still functioning. They make their money on technology. They don't really care about the profit margins on graphic novels, where it's absolutely instrumental to the direct market itself. And they have one thing that really stands out that Amazon and none of them can really compete with, and that is floppy comic books. They are absolutely vital to the future of the direct market itself. Yes, they do need to adapt, but Marvel and DC also need to arm retailers with amazing stories people don't want to say no to. And this is the last thing that Milton Greep said in his article that I'll cover. Boyle listed a number of specific issues with Marvel and DC content, some political, but I don't buy most of them are critical, and some of them don't matter at all. Good stories about gay characters sell well. Good stories about female characters sell well. Good stories about Black and Latino superheroes sell well. I think there's a general reason why Marvel and DC's aren't selling. They aren't very good. And I 100% agree. Stories about gay characters will sell well if they're good. Stories about minority characters will sell well if they are good. Stories about female characters will sell well, but you want to know what won't sell well? Gay stories about straight characters that we've known for 60 years. That won't sell well. Minority stories about white characters that we've seen for the last 60 years. That doesn't sell well. Female stories about male characters that we've known for the last 50 years, and then you just decided to replace them with a female character because apparently the mantle was the only thing that made the character special. Phil Boyle was 100% right. Stop with all the identity politics. Stop trying to make all these radical changes to the characters. If you need more gay characters, create more gay characters. If you need more minority characters, create more minority characters. If you need more female characters, create more female characters and actually give them origins that make sense so you can tell the stories that you want to do. Stop making the massive changes and actually start writing comic books that comic book readers want to read. That is the big problem. There's a lack of quality and far too many people with agendas inside of Marvel and DC that have nothing to do with actually selling comic books or telling good stories. That is absolutely what's destroying comic books. And I do give a tip of the cap to Phil Boyle for writing this and getting a lot of people out there talking about it. You know, you said something that was right on the money when everybody has to respond to it, and you get a million different reasons why it ain't true. You know he was absolutely right because everyone had to tell him how wrong he was. And obviously, I also covered the Phil Boyle article right here on this channel. If you didn't get a chance to see that and you're not sure exactly what I was talking about there, I do have that video right here. You should probably check this one out. It was a fantastic video, and I think you're going to love it. There's also a link in the video description.